Welcome, everyone. Let me take just a quick moment and give a few thanks. I think it's absolutely warranted and a good way to begin. First, of course, I want to thank the National Chung-Hsing University. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak with each of you today. I want to thank the International Lecture Series. I know this is something that you've been promoting, and I'm glad to be a part of it, and certainly to the College of Management. To each and every one, thank you. I want to give a special thank you, though, to National Chung-Hsing University's Dr. Yun-Chen Ho, Elson, my friend of many years, and the person who facilitated this opportunity. Elson, thank you. You are a great person, and I want to just publicly acknowledge that and say thank you for all of your efforts to make all of this happen. So great, and I am absolutely grateful. All right, one quick housekeeping item and we'll begin. Got a little red arrow here, you can probably see that, and the slides, they're numbered. So if later there is a question or something you need clarified, whatever it may be, and you refer to that slide number, that'd be great. Probably the easiest way to identify what it is that you're wanting to learn something more about. Okay, there we are. Let's begin. Well, as the slide indicates, I am John Bedker. Pleasure to be with you. What are we going to talk about? Very important. Know that up front. I'll get into that more just a little bit later. But main question, how aviation and shipping inform strategy and leadership decision-making in the Indo-Pacific. Subtitle, the role of situational awareness for leaders and decision makers in the current Indo-Pacific environment. Okay, so there we go. Main topic, subtopic. My story. What training, what knowledge, what experience brought me here today to speak with each of you? Fair question, something you need to know probably right up front. Well, of course there's education. I'll try to amplify certainly well beyond the education, but let's begin with that. I received my bachelor's from the United States Naval Academy. Got a BS in analytical management, managing numbers, quant, right? Many of you are familiar with that. After graduating from the Naval Academy, I went to the U.S. Navy Flight School, where I became a Navy pilot. Incredible experience, great experience, and then I served as a naval officer on both active and reserve naval service for 24 years. I retired as a captain, had the wonderful opportunity to have command. So some of this aviation and shipping that we're going to talk about, it comes from fairly solid roots. I did have command, I did have a deep craft command, and I did have a major command. So the leadership part, I really feel strongly I know something about over a long period of time. Point of reference, my last billet I retired from as a naval reservist was as the commanding officer, Force Protection and Security Headquarters Unit, Atlantic. Later, I went on to receive a master's. I went to Harvard University, did my master's in government and economics, double major. And then later, on for my doctorate at Henley Business School, University of Reading. My PhD, subject matter expertise, is in leadership and organizational behavior. So what all happened in between there? Well, lots of things happened. After the bachelor's, of course, the Navy, I've touched on that a little bit. After my master's, it is not surprising. Many of my colleagues and I all went to Wall Street. I worked for a firm called E.F. Hutton back in the day, and then later I returned to flying as an airline pilot. We can talk about commercial aviation today as well. And then I started my own firm. After 39 years of being in the Naval Reserve, being an airline pilot, and running an international management consulting firm as the president and CEO, I thought I was going to retire. And that is when I went back and did my PhD. As you can see at the bottom there, it says I'm a United States Fulbright Scholar. I am. I was awarded a Fulbright after Henley, and I had the great honor and distinction to be the U.S. Fulbright Scholar 2018 and 2019 in Belarus. Now that's a name in a country that most people would not have known much about, but certainly now it's a little more common. Why? I was there at the prequel of war. Russia, Ukraine, Belarus. Interrelated, interacted. And I had the incredible experience of being there before the invasion. Okay, so basically my life has been three things: practitioner, a leader, and a scholar. Well, my primary objective in this lecture, share my training, my knowledge, and my experience. We're going to focus on strategy and leadership, something I've had a lifetime in dealing with. But we're not going to talk so much about theory. We're going to talk about practice. Strategy and leadership in practice. Well, let's begin first of all with my strategy. A simple but important strategy that I think you will benefit from incorporating into your practice as you go forward in your professional lives. Now, some of you might be in an executive MBA program, I understand, and for that, you may already have that opportunity to incorporate this into your practice. So let's talk about my strategy. Threefold. First, tell you what I'm going to tell you. Second, tell you. And then third, tell you what I told you. Okay, let's go back to that beginning. How many of you can remember that topic and the subtopic for this lecture? I told you what I was going to tell you, okay? Keep in mind that oftentimes people could be very attentive. They're eager to hear what you have to say, but they may not be capturing what it is that you're trying to tell them. Let's just do a quick review. The main topic, how aviation and shipping inform strategy and leadership decision-making in the Indo-Pacific. Subtopic, the role of situational awareness. Now, I want you to know that that's key and that's critical. It is what I call a leadership core competency, to be situationally aware. And the role that situational awareness has for leaders and decision makers in this current Indo-Pacific environment is one of our goals today. All right, strategies often begin with the macro picture. What's that big picture? We need to know that. Well, on October 16th, 2022, the Chinese Communist Party will meet for their 20th Congress. Now, you may not be listening to this lecture until after the Congress is met, but I'm recording it before, so I put that there. But in fact, you may be hearing it after the 20th Congress has met. Well, Xi is expected to present a plan, what he calls, in quotes, national rejuvenation. Basically, three key components to this national rejuvenation plan. One, to expand economic development. Two, gain further international influence. And third, to advance China's military buildup. 3 key goals. All right. So, what are the challenges? That's what he wants to do. What are his challenges from a macro perspective? Well, China's economic growth rate was 2.5% in the first 6 months of 2022, far less than the target growth rate of 5.5. So he's not performing economically the way that he would like. Second, youth unemployment is 20%. Far too large a number. Young, energetic, bright people, not a group you want sitting around. The coronavirus, everyone is fully aware of the implications and the history of that, but coronavirus-related issues have met with resistance. People in China, the People's Republic of China, have not been 100% on board. In fact, there have been a number of instances where the people have, in fact, resisted. There's another laundry list of challenges on a macro level. Banking scandals, mortgage scandals, power outages on far too regular a basis, all add to the internal disconnect, go back to that youth unemployment, and to external scrutiny, the view by the rest of the world. Well, a few more challenges. There certainly now currently are heightened tensions between the U.S. and China over Taiwan. We're going to talk a lot about that today. International pressures placed upon Xi over ties to Putin. A little too cozy, a little too chummy with Putin. There's international pressure put on Xi because of that. And the economic engine that is China has created a number, particularly in the tech sector, of very wealthy Chinese. And Xi wants to confront this new generation of wealthy Chinese. And then lastly, this overarching question, the question for all of us, is the role of autocracy in the 21st century. Is that the path to govern, to lead? Xi's going to have to deal with that, confront that, answer that. What about Taiwan? What's the macro strategy there? Well, the president, Xi Jinping, has a platform. She would like to have Taiwan as independent. She has refused to accept the previous president's formula for increased cross-strait ties. And she stated that she'll conduct cross-strait affairs in accordance with the Republic of China's Constitution. Now you can imagine this has not met with a very favorable response from the mainland. There are a number of macro challenges for Xi, though. Limited military capability. Many of you are already familiar with that, but it's important to state. Strategy, training, and force investments are far too low, far too limited. And each of those poses a challenge. The one country, two system goal of Xi, highly unethical. acceptable. People in Taiwan fear a repeat of the Hong Kong freedom losses. And from where I come from, the United States, the U.S. policy known as strategic ambiguity is absolutely unworkable. It's been written about, it's been discussed, it's been publicized in print in many places. It absolutely requires clarity. Okay, let's look at data. Data is important. We need data to form strategy and to inform leaders, because we do not want to think about making a decision without having accurate data. So let's look at some data. 90% of Taiwanese oppose China's military aggression against Taiwan. 80% believe a cross-strait peace is the responsibility of both sides, not just Taiwan, both sides. 76% reject that one country, two systems approach, which has been proposed by Beijing. 76% reject one country, two systems. And 86% believe that only, let's underline that word, only Taiwanese have the right to choose the path of self-determination for Taiwan. Well, each of these data points is important as you're framing strategy, as leaders are making judgments and decisions. Let's look at a little more data. TSMC, I'm sure you all know that name, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They produce 65% of the world's semiconductors. 65%. But the key, the important component here is they produce 92% of the world's most advanced chips. So disrupting Taiwan and disrupting its capacity to deliver the vast majority of the world's most advanced chips would not just create a supply chain problem, it would in fact create economic chaos. Well, as I've said, thinking about strategy, we want to start by looking at this big picture. What's the macro view, right? Well, here's a chart. Taiwan Ministry of Defense and the Council on Foreign Relations. Here's the numbers from the year 2000 to currently. China is a significant trading partner with Taiwan, even in light of everything that's going on currently and has been going on throughout the coronavirus time period. That bottom piece, the trade with China, is continuing to grow. And its percentage of trade is continuing to grow. Very important data point to keep mindful of as we talk about strategy and we talk about leaders making decisions. So, what do we have? Well, we've got two huge data points, two macro points, what I call elephants in the room. Trade and chips. These are the elephants in the room. All right, talk about defense. The defense of Taiwan has many components. Arms, only one of those components, but an important one. And in a conflict, it could be a critical component. To maintain, develop, and to grow Taiwan's global economy requires microcomponents like aviation and shipping that we're going to be talking about in particular today, that these not be at risk. So we can't disconnect and certainly not discard what's going on militarily. Now this piece shows arms sales by the recent U.S. administrations. And certainly the United States is the main arms supplier to Taiwan. Now you can see these numbers are relatively low here in 2022. And it could be strategic, it could be intentional, and it could be just low. We need to delve into that a little bit more, to understand better, to make sense and meaning, which is important for leaders to make informed decisions, make sense and make meaning of what that data point really is telling us. Okay? So we'll start with context. Context is important, that contextual framework. What's the state of current aviation and shipping in the Indo-Pacific? We've taken this look at this macro view, and now we're going to take this micro view at two key components to the economy for Taiwan. We're going to do it in context, and we're going to build a framework by looking at the current state of both. So let's begin. Begin with commercial aviation. Well, COVID has been the game changer. We all know that. Let's compare the pre-COVID airline traffic with the current traffic levels in the Indo-Pacific. Well, first, South Asia, 90%. Now you might jump on that number, and I want to caution you. 90% looks good, sounds good. Say, wow, what a rebound. Good job. Way to go. Congratulations. And that may all be accurate and warranted. But let's flip that coin. What does that really tell us? 90% return from pre-COVID airline traffic levels in South Asia. What that is telling us on that flip side is 10% has not returned. What are those fixed costs? What are the direct and indirect operating costs? But you're only getting 90% of the traffic. Are you able to sustain a profitable operation missing 10% of your traffic? And I will tell you, in the airline business, that is a very difficult proposition. So as good as that 90% number looks, it may be a very challenging number. Well, then what happens if we work our way down? We see Southwest Asia at 55, Southeast Asia at 42, and then, holy cow, Northeast Asia, 20%. 20% is the current traffic level compared with pre-COVID for Northeast Asia. What does that equate to? Well, I'll use US dollars because that's what I'm familiar with. Airline traffic in 2020 between North America and Asia resulted in a $9 billion US dollar loss. $9 billion US dollar loss, and that is just North America to Asia. No internal or domestic traffic considered. No European traffic considered. No other places in the world considered. Just North America. Okay? This micro economic factor, commercial aviation, has an impact on the larger economy in Taiwan. Let's look at this from a couple of different ways. Let's look at the mainland first. These are the main carriers. I'm sure you all know them. Big three. Let's look up here, start up here. Well, business was going quite well. Traffic was booming and growing. Upward lines, upward lines. And then, of course, COVID, and you see the plunge, right? Understand that. Then, the main Chinese airlines try to rebound, make an effort. Fail again. Make another effort. And now, this steady, ongoing decline by all of the main Chinese carriers. So going into Q2, second quarter of 2022, these traffic levels are at levels that are not going to result in profits. They're going to result in significant losses. Airlines are going to have a strategy. Airlines are going to have to think about making hard and tough decisions. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? When are we going to do it? And how are we going to pay for it? So, there's the revenue passenger kilometers for the major Chinese airlines pre-COVID to now. Well, I showed you that $9 billion loss figure for just North America and Asia. Well, and then I went on and said, companies have to make these really hard decisions. They have to be strategic. They have to think and act. They not only have to be reactive, they have to be proactive. Well, here's the major U.S. airlines. And here are their charts. And again, business was doing well in 2019. And then, of course, COVID came. You see the steep and dramatic declines. Now, notice that this side scale here is net income. So this zero number, that's the flat line, right? Losses, significant losses. Well, then what happened after 2020? Work, hard work, tough decisions, strategic decisions. Leaders had a plan and they executed it. Not without fault and some interruption, but where are they today in Q2, second quarter 2022? Each of the major U.S. airlines in the United States, not a great profit, but each and every one is now profitable. They must have done some things right. All right. What about Europe? Was their experience similar or different? Was North America, certainly the U.S., unique? Or did they follow similar strategic paths? Well, again, you're familiar. Here's the major players. Here's the graph. Things are looking pretty good in Europe pre-COVID. COVID comes, the deep drop. Struggling to get back. And now again, in the second quarter of 2022, you see each of the largest European carriers profitable. So they rebounded as well. What do we learn about this micro view and looking at this micro data? Well, a couple of things. I want to take this bigger view of Europe because it tells an interesting story. Again, we know the graphs. Down, fighting, struggling to come up. Most of the carriers are grouped relatively closely, similarly positioned. These are what we call full cost carriers, full service carriers. I want to take a moment here and look at this beige, brown graph. That is Ryanair. Now, Ryanair in Europe is what they call an LCC, a low-cost carrier. Now, historically, this is sort of the theory part, the classroom part, airlines, a person selling a ticket or a person buying a ticket, the determinants are really threefold: frequency, reliability, and price, in that order. That historically has been the mantra. Frequency, reliability, and price. And look at Ryanair though, a low-cost carrier. They focused on price. Now the businessman, the businesswoman, the business traveler, the wealthier traveler, they're interested in getting to that meeting on time. Frequency is important. Does the flight go every day? Does it go several times a day? If they need on short notice to get from their home to that customer, that client, that potential client's place, can they get there quickly? Can they get there frequently? If the meeting is at 10 o'clock and the flight leaves at 8, it's a 1-hour flight, you land at 9. One might conclude that might work. But what about reliability? What if that 8 o'clock flight doesn't leave at 8? It leaves late. And historically, we can annotate. We have data to know that this flight seldom leaves on time, that it's frequently late. And what happens if that flight is departing late, it will often arrive late. So frequency and reliability have long been the first two determinants for air travel. Price is important, but that leisure travel, that recreational traveler, they might be more interested in that. But the money making in airlines is not off of that passenger. It's off of that premium, business, wealthy traveler. But here we see Ryanair focusing on price, not frequency and not reliability. A new strategy, a new model. It's been copied by others. Time will tell whether this becomes the new mantra. All right, back to Asia. I really want to only point this out quickly, but I think importantly on the first two pieces of this chart. Looking at Thailand. Domestic capacity in Thailand recovered to 77% of the 2019 levels. And again, that sounds good. It is good. But the caution here is, well, 23% hasn't yet. But the number of international seats from the country remained 64% down. So domestically maybe pretty good. Internationally, not so good. Let's look at the root cause. I'm sure in your coursework you've talked about that. Root cause analysis. Look at this. 99.3%. China was the largest international market from Thailand in 2019, but capacity shrank by more than 99% in 2021. So this problem is regional. It is endemic. And it has a pervasive effect on the balance sheets and the earnings of countries throughout Asia. That number is a shocker. All right, so a little more data. What happened in Taiwan? What happened with China Airlines? A little more micro data here. From 2010 to 2020, this steady, uninterrupted gains. And then, of course, 2020. COVID has set in. Very, very difficult business case for profitability. That is the current story in Taiwan. All right, so I said these hard decisions, these tough decisions, decisions that needed to be both proactive and reactive. That's the strategic challenge here. What has China Airlines done? Well, let's talk about that. Here you see a photo of an Airbus A330. Very nice airplane, very reliable airplane, but an aging airplane. Not as fuel efficient or passenger efficient as the current aircraft. So, what is the current strategy for China Airlines? Here we go. There's the A330 picture we just saw. 21 of them in service. It's the largest single aircraft number in service for China Airlines. It's going to be retired. I said it was an aging aircraft. It is. And it's going to be replaced by a Boeing 787-9. The 787, many of you probably know, is the Dreamliner, the Boeing Dreamliner. Very new, very modern, very efficient aircraft. Also, the Airbus A321neo, also new, also highly efficient, okay? So what's going to happen looks like this. These Airbus are going to be retired to be replaced by Dreamliners, 787s. 8 orders with options to convert from the Dash 9 to the Dash 10. That's proactive strategy. The deliveries begin in 2025. They're going to replace all of the A330s. And they've also placed an order for another 17 Airbus A321s. Now, here is the interesting question and the challenge from a strategic point of view. Right now, China Airlines has 10 Boeing 777-300 ERs. That's the extended range version of the Boeing 777. But notice the seating. And notice the seating compared to the current Airbus A330. I made the point before, I hope you captured it, that the money-making part of an airplane are the front seats, the premium seats. Economy plus, business, first class, flagship, whatever it's called, those front seats. That is where the yield is. That is where the money making is. And notice here in this Airbus, a number of seats, 277 in back, that's coach, and a limited number of seats up front, first class. Well, what did they do when they went to purchase the Boeing? Said, we recognize the economics and we have the traffic. The demand is there. Let's have fewer coach seats compared with that Airbus. And let's add these premium seats in the premium economy, in the business class, and in first class. This is a profitable strategy. TBA on the Dreamliner, to be announced. Well, I think the case is made that the numbers will look more like this in seating arrangement rather than like this in the older arrangement. Now, simultaneous with this is another reality. The reality is that cargo is a key market for Taiwan and China Airlines. It's a critical market as well. And what have they done? They've engaged. The original order for 3 aircraft and 3 options has already been converted to a firm order. An additional 4 aircraft were ordered in January of this year. And the deliveries started in December of 2020. Cargo has been a hugely affirmative and from a business case point of view, accretive money-making, accretive strategic decision. The Boeing 777 freighter and the Boeing 747-400 freighter both have been highly successful for China Airlines. So that's the story with aviation. Let's look at shipping. This seems like a very busy slide, and I picked it intentionally to make the point. The shipping in the Taiwan Straits is absolutely incredible. The number of ships that transit and the number of containers that are taken and delivered is incredible, not only in the raw data, but in its global impact. Over half of the container ships in the world pass through the Taiwan Straits each year. 88% of the largest ships in the world transited the Taiwan Straits last year. Here at the beginning of October, I was able to take a GPS snapshot. The ship traffic, which you may not appreciate, is immense, up and down and all around the strait. I can't underscore the importance of having safe, secure, and open shipping lanes in the Taiwan Straits. All right, well, there's tensions. We know that. The median line, that line that runs down the middle, back and forth. You notice there's a little less traffic there. It's supposed to respect that median line. That's what it's called, China's median line. The number of violations suggests that this is really a dress rehearsal, practicing, working on choreography to disrupt. Surging incursions from Chinese jets in the air are rewriting the status quo in the Taiwan Straits. What has been the response from the United States? Well, we're concerned, but that's not enough. We've dispatched guided missile cruisers. Here is a picture of the USS Antietam. Another boat, the USS Chancellorsville, is also in the area to navigate the Taiwan Straits. Now, this was taken at the beginning of the month, but it gives you an idea of now putting warships in the straits. Because, as I stated, these shipping lanes, freedom of the seas, open seas, critical to the economic lifeblood of Taiwan. Well, what's a ship like this capable of? I think this is important to understand this micro view of the shipping. Here's some of the sensors and processing systems. Multifunction radars, air search radar, fire control radars, surface search radars, fire control radars. Carries a full sonar suite of passive and active sensing sonar. And sadly, but importantly, armament. An entire array of armament, including Harpoon missiles, light and heavyweight guns. Well, this is necessary in a strategic plan to ensure the capacity for Taiwan to receive and deliver goods. The other side, though, shadowing, lurking, violating that median line. U.S. naval ships routinely see Chinese warships in the straits. Okay. Well, we've talked a bit about this macro view. We've talked a little bit about the micro, particularly as regards aviation and shipping. I want to start by saying that these are only two components of a many variable equation. But let's take a bit of a summary of what we have looked at, what we have seen. Strategists and leaders, they have to make sense and they have to make meaning of both the threat and the opportunities confronting them. And in their judgment and decision making, they're going to have to say, what should I do? What can I do? And why would I do it? Well, leaders focus on opportunity. So don't lose sight of this tension. There is this tension between threat and opportunity. In the brain, they actually sit literally next to one another. But leaders focus on opportunity. Very important concept. And you need to take that one away. Leadership, so many things. I'm sure you've read many books and had courses. But what's it boil down to? Simply doing the right thing. Leadership is about doing the right thing. This is Xi's opportunity. It's her opportunity socially. It's her opportunity politically. It's her opportunity economically. And it is her opportunity militarily. So an awful lot to consider, not just from the macro view and the two little micro views we've looked at only in Cameo, aviation and shipping. But let's flip the coin. What do autocrats do? Well, autocrats focus on threat. That's their game. And Xi will do that. He will threat. He will test the boundaries. These events that have occurred in the last few months, as a previous slide said, they're rehearsals. They're practice. They're practicing for the main event. And then those threats will turn potentially, we don't know, but potentially to action. Xi may do the wrong thing. So threat and opportunity, two sides of a very important coin. The leader chooses opportunity and must take advantage of those opportunities. The autocrat, they're all about threat. And they're going to focus on that. And then, in the end, act on it. So let's review the strategy for this presentation. Tell them what you're going to tell them. I think we've gone over that, and then I repeated the slide, so I think you knew what we were going to talk about. And then tell them. We have taken a macro view, not just in words, but in data. And we have tried to do some small amount in our limited time together here of sense and meaning making about that. I've told you something about economics. I've told you something about the people socially. We've talked about the military. We have spoken about the topic and the subtopic. Don't forget that subtopic, situational awareness, right? And so now what I'm doing is telling you what we just reviewed, what I just told you. So I think we're on track with the strategy, so far anyway. How aviation and shipping inform strategy and leadership, many ways. And how that helps, that aids the decision making in the Indo-Pacific. And, as I continue to mention, that role of situational awareness, a very key, important, in fact critical, leadership core competency. All right, let's go to an example. There may be many possible outcomes, many potential outcomes. This is only one. I don't mean to say that it's the, but it's certainly the one that's in view, presently being tested, being choreographed, being rehearsed. So we should talk about it and what those implications are on a macro and micro. So we'll look at the macro and we'll see its effect upon aviation and shipping, all right? This is an article from the New York Times, current, August 25th. Chris Buckley, Marco Hernandez, Pablo Robles, and Amy Chen. They wrote this article, they did these graphs. What they talk about is how China could choke Taiwan. And we're going to go through what that might look like, because prior proper planning is important for strategists, for leaders, and for decision makers. So here's the picture, China, Taiwan. Here is what that zone looks like for a possible blockade. Again, one strategy, but it is the one currently in view. All right, the geography, Taiwan's geography, leaves it vulnerable to a blockade. One of the reasons for that strategy. Taiwan is vulnerable to a blockade. Its population, its industry, and its ports are concentrated on its western flank closest to China. You see them encircled and highlighted here. Okay? So geography is an issue, an important issue. China could impose a blockade by sending ships and submarines to prevent vessels from entering or leaving Taiwan's ports. It could use warplanes and missiles to dominate the skies. Well, we've seen this, right? Already. Current events. Anyone that's watched the news, read the papers, you all are keenly aware of this. So this blockade has disruption written all over it. The reason that I picked aviation and shipping was not coincidental. It was intentional. Because both of those play a key part in the disruption of the economy, of life in Taiwan. All right. Well, what if it's just limited, though? Well, it still is disruptive. One of the world's busiest trade routes. We talked about it. I showed you a picture. I gave you data. Much of the shipping traffic in the Taiwan Strait goes to these two ports. They're both key and critical. I'm sure you're aware of both. They both sit on the western side of Taiwan. So disruption of these ports, disruption of shipping in the strait could threaten one of the world's busiest trade routes. What about the military? Well, we've seen these exercises, right? It may be a prequel. It may be a dress rehearsal. They may have additional purposes, though. They were meant to intimidate, create that fear, exercise that threat to Taiwan and to its allies, like the United States. They also want to do this regularly, repeatedly, to try to normalize the presence in these areas, raising the risk of a conflict. If you go up close to somebody enough times, eventually you may bump into them. Now that could be true with an airplane, it could be true with a ship. Every time that there is someone that invades one of these protected zones, there needs to be a response. Each side wants to know, needs to know who it is, what it is, and why. Here you see these missile zones, what China has done in their dress rehearsal of a possible blockade. Sometimes running along the coast, other times overflying, and doing it on the other coast as well. Here you see Chinese military helicopters off the shore, just across the strait from Taiwan. This is taken on the first day of their, in quotes, military drills. Shipping out there in the channel, easily disrupted by a military event. An actual blockade, though, now we're not talking dress rehearsal, we're not talking practice, but an actual blockade would involve hundreds of ships and aircraft, as well as submarines. Trying to seal off Taiwan's ports and airports, and to repel interventions by warships and planes sent by the United States and other allies of Taiwan, of which there are many. But this blockade could very well shut off possible interventions. Well, where are these bases located? Chinese bases. It's red dots. Up and down, north and south of Taiwan. U.S. military bases, South Korea, good ways away. Out in Guam, even further away. Okinawa's a little closer, but nothing like all of these. So, an actual blockade sending hundreds of ships, submarines, aircraft into this relatively small area could be hugely disruptive to Taiwan ports and airports, and may provide a real challenge for U.S. and allied forces to come to the aid of Taiwan. So, another strategy, the communication. 90% of the data from Taiwan to the world goes through these cables. They're global. But if they were cut off, if they were severed, Taiwan could be electronically shut off from the rest of the world. So this strategy of blockade around Taiwan has many components. The disruption of aviation and shipping, micro elements of an economy, but macro elements of a strategy, could be hugely disruptive to Taiwan. But destroying the capacity to send and receive communication, data, to lose connection largely with the world, could be critical. All right, so we talked about these air incursions, more and more and more of them. This midline, China's strategy. And military exercises, what I keep referring to as dress rehearsal. Look back in 2020. It's only 2 years ago. Very small. But then they increase. They get larger. And currently, they're significantly larger. All right? Now, the source of this data is the Taiwan Ministry of National Defense. But the results have real sense and real meaning. All right, a few pictures. Here we go. The U.S. is an ally. The U.S. President Biden, here in the picture, has said he absolutely will support Taiwan in the event of a military incursion by China into Taiwan. He has said that on multiple occasions. He has met with allies in the Indo-Pacific and has tried to discuss this important issue, to try to plan and strategize for this important issue. But it's like the boxer says, everybody's got a plan till somebody gets hit. Because then the fight's on. So we'll see. The issue of strategic ambiguity. The one China, two countries absolutely won't work. Propaganda, part of the threat, part of the choreography. Here you see a Chinese state media photo showing a J-15 landing on China's aircraft carrier. We do the same thing. Back in the early days of Congresswoman Pelosi, that's her there in the middle, her second term, many years ago, as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, a congresswoman, she went to Tiananmen Square in 1991 and stood for democracy in China. And this is the battle, democracy versus autocracy. We'll have to see how it plays out. But as you know, now Speaker Pelosi, the leader of the U.S. House of Representatives in the United States, recently came with her entourage to Taiwan to show her support for the Taiwanese people. She met with officials after arriving and did a number of things. One of them was to agree to begin to build plants to create advanced semiconductors in the United States so that that choke point in the case of a blockade would at least be somewhat mitigated. So she came to help, to be a sign, to be a signal, and also to do business, to help Taiwan and the rest of the world. Well, how do the Taiwanese feel? Well, here's a gentleman, co-owner of a cafe, said he would fight. He would fight if China tried to take Taiwan by force. So I said I was a Fulbright scholar in Belarus, and I'll tell you, I saw that sentiment a lot. Many people saying things like that. Hopefully, what we're seeing is not a prequel to what we have now seen between Russia and Ukraine. But people standing up, fighting for democracy, for the right to be free, for the right of self-determination. We have seen this in Ukraine. And now we're beginning to see people saying they would fight if China tried to take Taiwan. Here we see the results of some of the exercises to date. Creating a mess, creating havoc as shells are lobbed, trash is picked up. These people, though, say they're okay. Things are going to be normal. And I think that hope is a good thing. Mostly normal during the drills. That's good. Positivism is good. Here we see the flip side, though. A rusting tank on the beach. You don't even need to see this young woman's face to sense and feel the exasperation, the concern. And here you see the beached tank. Secretary of State of the United States, Tony Blinken. Again, also traveling around the Indo-Pacific, meeting with allies, talking about trade and increasing trade this coming fall in all of the Indo-Pacific, including Taiwan, and also talking about the security of Taiwan. This Navy, I said in an earlier slide, underfunded, underinvested, undertrained, undercapitalized. More perhaps propaganda from China. State media released this photo showing the People's Liberation Army being launched during drills. This is part of that display of threat. We want people to know that there is a threat. Similarly in the air, joint military exercise between the Japanese and U.S. forces. Okay? Okay, so a couple of things in closing here is one, I took slides from a lot of sources. I want to make sure I give full and complete attribution. A number of people have done incredible work, and what that really says is a number of people understand what's going on between China and Taiwan. A number of people are writing about it, informing and sharing with the world as I've tried to share with you. The maps, the exercises, all of the traffic, lots of people and lots of sources have contributed, and here they are. I want to make sure that I share them all with you. And then lastly, I want to say thank you. I want to thank you to each of you who spent your time, your busy time, to listen to this presentation, to learn a little bit, I hope, about what's going on, raising your situational awareness, informing you about data and key points, macro and micro, economically, militarily, politically, so that you can have a voice, a more informed voice in the decision making going forward. So I thank each of you for being able to be here with you, for being able to share this lecture on the Indo-Pacific, about aviation, about shipping, about how one micro view can hopefully inform a macro view and vice versa. The macro can help inform the micro, and how you can be better informed. I thank you, and I wish you well. Take care.